Hey everybody, welcome to another lesson of learning Japanese. Today we are going to be covering the difference between transitive verbs and intransitive verbs in Japanese. So basically this is going to be our guide to being able to tell the difference between an intransitive verb and a transitive verb. This is probably going to be a two-parter. And so what we'll basically do is we'll just do a short introduction. What are intransitive verbs? What are transitive verbs? How they work in English, how they work in Japanese compared to English. Then lastly, we'll do 3 guidelines, the 3 kind of tools or methods you'll use to be able to tell the difference. And the last of the 3 is going to be a pretty long section, so that will probably be saved for our part 2 of this. Okay, so let's begin. What is a transitive verb? A transitive verb is just going to be a verb word that needs basically a direct object to be used with it such that the action that is the verb can be basically performed on that object. On the other hand, an intransitive verb is just a verb word or an action that the subject performs, just simply performs without actually affecting anything. So just a little trivia here. In Japanese, transitive verbs are called kadoshi and intransitive verbs are called jidoshi. And doshi means verb, and if you look at the 2 words next to each other up close or whatever, you'll see that the only difference between them is the first kanji in them. For transitive verbs, we have the kanji that basically means other, because when you perform a transitive verb, you're affecting another thing. And for intransitive verbs, that first character is the one that means basically self or oneself, because when you perform an intransitive verb, you're simply doing it by yourself without affecting others. So in English, the distinction between transitive verbs and intransitive verbs can basically be categorized 3 different ways. First up, we have the verbs that are basically just intransitive. Words like to arrive or to die, you don't have a direct object to these verb words. You just do them yourself and it happens to you. I arrived, I died. Secondly, we have words that can be both transitive and intransitive. For example, the verb to eat. I can say I eat spaghetti every week. The direct object of that is spaghetti, so that's using it as a transitive verb. Or alternatively, I can say I eat when I'm sad, and there's no direct object to that. I'm not saying what I'm eating, I'm just saying that I do that action when I'm sad. So that's being used as an intransitive. And last but not least, the third category are words that have basically a transitive version and an intransitive version. In English, to lie is to do something, to lie down, like you lie your own body, you yourself lie. And to lay is to basically do the same thing but to an object, not yourself. So I lie down versus I laid the clothes down. Or the words rise and raise. I rised up off my bed, or I raised my cat up off my bed. So yeah, 3 categories right there. Just intransitive, or intransitive and transitive, or 2 different versions of the word for the respective transitive or intransitive cases. Okay, so now moving on to Japanese, it basically pretty much works the same way. We still have these 3 categories. Words that can only be intransitive. What's the Japanese word for arrive? Suku. So sukimashita is going to be I arrived. That's intransitive. You can't really use it as transitive because arrive doesn't take a direct object. Words that can be both intransitive and transitive depending on the context. Maishu ni spaghetti o tabemasu. I eat spaghetti every week. That's using taberu to eat as a transitive verb because you're saying what you eat, the spaghetti. So what do we have here? We have first the word maishu, which is going to translate to every week. Mai means every, shu is just week. We have the particle ni marking it as a time. Then we have the word spaghetti, and this is going to translate to spaghetti. We have the direct object marker o there, big giveaway, marking as a direct object, and then simply the verb taberu to follow up with it conjugating to the mas form just because it's a polite sentence, tabemasu. Alternatively, kanashii toki taberu is just gonna mean I eat when I'm sad, and that's using it as an intransitive verb because you don't say what you eat. There's no direct object, you're just performing the verb yourself. Kanashi is the adjective that means sad, basically. We're using it with the word toki, which is kind of a grammar pattern in and of itself. Basically means when blank, so when sad. Then you say whatever it is that happened when sad. And what we're gonna fill in with that blank with is just a single word, single verb word, taberu, which can be used as a transitive or intransitive verb. In this case, it's transitive because you're not saying what you're eating. And again, the final third category, words that have a transitive version and an intransitive version. And this is kind of where Japanese kind of specializes or zones in on. Our first example of this will be the verb pairing of tomaru to mean to stop, intransitive, and tomeru, which means to stop, transitive. So if we were to use those in example sentence, we would have, let's do, jiko wa kosu o tometa. This is going to translate to the accident stopped traffic, and that's being used transitively because the accident is the thing that performs the action, but it also has the direct object of the traffic as the thing that it's stopping. We have the word jiko, of course, which means accident. We have the wa marking it as the topic. We have the word kotsu, which is going to translate to traffic. We're going to mark it as a direct object with the direct object marker o. And then we have the verb tomeru, which means to stop something, not yourself. It is going to be conjugated into the past ta form because it's in the past. It happened in the past and it's a plain form sentence. Alternatively, if we use it intransitively now, we can say something like densha wa tomatta, and this is going to translate to the train stopped. It simply stopped. There's no direct object. It itself stopped. Densha, of course, means train. We're marking as the topic with the particle wa, and then we simply have the verb tomaru, which means to stop in its past ta form. So like I said earlier, this category right here, the words that have like two different versions to them, a transitive form and an intransitive form, is what the Japanese language kind of zones in on. It's arguably more efficient than English, you might be able to say. The thing about English is for the pairings of transitive and intransitive versions, like lie and lay and rise and raise, is there's not really a pattern to them. Like they're all unique cases for each pair. Like if I were to say, oh, so lay is the transitive version of the verb lie, so I replaced the I and the E in lie with an A and a Y to make it lay. Does that mean if I have the word rise and I want to turn it into transitive as well, I take out the I and the E and add an A and a Y and I would get some weird thing like raise, but it's spelled wrong, R-A-Y-S. That's not right. So yeah, it would be wrong to assume that that's like a pattern or something. And so in that sense, at least, the Japanese language is a lot more efficient than the English language when it comes to differentiating between transitive and intransitive verbs, because they will have patterns like that. After you learn like one pairing, you can go like, oh, this can apply to other ones as well, and it'll like apply to a lot, like 10 or more other pairings will be the same thing. The little problem is that there are still a lot of them. There's like, even though there are patterns, there are still a lot. I think we are going to cover like 6 or 8 of them in the part 2 video. So even though there are patterns for the Japanese language, you do have to put in a decent amount of time to memorize them, and even then they'll have exceptions. So in the end, you're gonna have to master distinguishing transitive and intransitive verbs through experience as you naturally come across them in conversation. Basically, even if you spend like hours right now just scanning the list that we're gonna provide with all of the patterns, it probably isn't the best idea because you're bound to forget the ones that are less often used. It'd be a good idea to memorize the very common words, but yeah, the thing is just don't sweat it too much if you don't know like every single pairing, because you'll come across them and it'll just be an intuitive way to learn them. You can hear them, and even if it's your first time hearing the word or seeing the word, it's actually possible to kind of guess with a smart guess whether it's transitive or intransitive without like having to look up it on the dictionary. And with that said, we are now going to segue into 3 guidelines or kind of like cheat codes or tips to basically keep you well equipped for a vast majority of these transitive, intransitive pairings you will encounter. So the 3 things that are going to help you most are: 1, the particle that is used with the verb; 2, the context of the rest of the sentence basically that the verb is used in; and 3, the patterns of the way the words end, like what characters they end in. And like I said at the beginning of this video, we're going to save that third one for the part 2 because it's going to be quite lengthy. But let's go ahead and jump right into the first one, the particle usage. So like I said at the beginning of the video, just from the straight definition of transitive verbs and the construction, the basic construction for transitive and intransitive verb usage that I was on the screen earlier, transitive verbs need a direct object, and if you're going to have a direct object, that means you're going to pretty much need the direct object marker O. So basically the first cheat code here, or thing to remember, is if you see the particle O, 99% of the time that's going to be a transitive verb. There's pretty much only one noteworthy exception that I can think of to that off the top of my head, is that when the object marker O is sometimes not really used to mark a direct object, it's used to mark a location, and in that case you might see an intransitive verb being used with the direct object marker O, and it wouldn't be transitive, it'd be intransitive. A very common simple example of that would just be something like ie o deta, and this is going to translate to basically I left the house. Here we have the word ie, which means house. We're marking house with the object marker O, but it's actually going to be marking as the location. And then we're going to use the verb deru. This is actually an intransitive verb. The transitive version of it is dasu. It's kind of an irregular one. But yeah, deru has a bunch of definitions actually, but basically to get out, while dasu, which is going to be the transitive version, that needs a direct object because it's transitive, so the definition will be like to submit out, basically to submit something out, or to send an object out. So you'll have to have an object used with that. In this particular sentence example, we're using the intransitive version, so there is no direct object. Even though the house is marked with the O, that's actually just marking as the location. The deru, or the deta, since it's in the past form, which is the past, is basically just expressing that I did the action without affecting some object. So I left the house. Okay, so now we'll move on to number 2, the second guideline, which is basically the context of the rest of the sentence. This could kind of, in a way, include particle, but it is also bigger than that. So we're gonna provide 2 example sentences to illustrate this idea of sometimes it can be pretty difficult to determine if a verb is being used as an intransitive verb or a transitive verb, and sometimes it can just be really easy. So let's do an example of a case where it might be not so easy, a bit confusing if you like go into a sentence and you're seeing some words you've never seen before or something like that. We'll still keep the sentence simple though, just be 3 words, and it'll be something like enpitsu ga oshita. This is using the word enpitsu, which means basically pencil. It's a noun. It's going to be marked with the particle ga here, but let's just ignore that for the sake of this example, since we already covered particle usage in the first step. So let's just say that the particle is some confusing thing. For some reason, it's like throwing us off. We don't really know what the particle is being used for, so we can't really use that cheat code to guess if this is transitive or intransitive or not. Then we have this verb word now, ochiru, which is in its past form, so ochita. So let's just say we don't know what this verb means. We don't know if it's transitive or intransitive. We're like seeing it for the first time. Maybe we know that kanji there, and that kanji means something like to go down, to fall, to drop. But even with those that kind of vague concept, we don't know. We can't really use that to tell if it's a transitive to drop or intransitive to fall. And so yeah, that is going to be a line where it would be kind of pretty hard to guess which one it is, because saying the pencil dropped or saying I dropped the pencil, both of those sentences are perfectly like really common, right? Those are very understandable things to say in everyday life. So yeah, it's hard to guess if that's transitive or intransitive. Now let's do an example of one where it's actually really easy to guess. But before we do that, maybe you want to know the answer to this one. It's actually being used as intransitive. Ochiru is the intransitive version of the verb to fall or to drop. The transitive version is going to be otosu. So yeah, this line right here is actually translating to the pencil fell. I didn't drop it, it fell by itself basically. So we'll probably do two. First will be just a normal verb that doesn't have two versions to it, an intransitive version and an intransitive version. Then we'll do another one with the two versions kind of thing. So this is the first one. So for our line, we have shita o kande shimata. This is gonna translate to, well, I'm not gonna tell you what it translates to just yet. I'll tell you the words that we're using. We have shita, which is gonna translate to tongue. We have the verb kamu, and then it's being conjugated into the te form, plus the grammar pattern shimao, which basically expresses that a verb is like completed to finality and it's like almost unintentional and it's kind of regretful. So yeah, te form plus shimata. Oh, we performed the verb and it's kind of unintentional and regretful. So it's kind of hard to challenge you to figure it out just from not spoiling anything but not giving you any information or enough information at the same time. But I think with what I just said, you should be able to figure out if that was transitive or intransitive. And the answer in 3, 2, 1 is that the verb was being used transitively. Obviously, let's just get away the most obvious giveaways. Just the particle O there, like I said, a vast majority of the times that's going to indicate that it's being used transitively. The other giveaway is the grammar pattern used in the sentence, te form plus shimata, to mean like regrettable action. Basically, the only logical thing is to assume that a tongue doesn't really ever perform an action by itself to the degree where you like it's regrettable or something. So it's most likely that you did something to your tongue that was regretful. And what is a very common thing that you do to your tongue that is regretful? It's accidentally biting it. So with that, you might have guessed that the verb word kamu is going to translate to bite. So yeah, altogether that sentence is going to translate to I bit my tongue. Alright, next we'll do another example. This time you're gonna have to find out whether it's a transitive or intransitive verb, and this will be one of those verbs that has basically two different versions. It doesn't really make a difference if you've never heard it before, but yeah, so our line will be kaito ga mitsukaru made kokoro mimashou. What is this going to translate to? I can't tell you. What I can tell you is that kaito translates to solution, and mitsukaru is a verb that has the concept association with the idea of finding. So is this a sentence using verb as a transitive or intransitive verb? What do you think? 3, 2, 1. The answer is that it is actually intransitive. So this sentence is going to translate to until a solution is found, let's keep working. Let's break it down bit by bit. First up, we have the word kaito, which I said means solution. We have the particle ga, marking it as the subject, and that was probably a big giveaway. There's no direct object marker O here, so there's not really a direct object, so you could have pretty easily presumed that this is being used as an intransitive verb, and the verb is mitsugaru, which means basically to be found. The transitive version of it is mitsukeru, and that's going to be to find, basically, to discover. However, it's being used with the intransitive version, mitsugaru, with an A. So kaito ga mitsugaru is going to be solution is found. We have the made there to mean until, the particle made. Then we have kokoro miru, which means basically to try, to work at something, and it's in its masho form, so it's like let's. So let's try until solution is found. So it's worth noting here, of course, that without that particle ga right there that gave us, it was the only clue that gave us the indication of whether it was transitive or intransitive. And even then, it may not always be 100% guaranteed to bank on just that one clue. So that's what is going to now segue us into the third guideline / cheat code, which would have helped us in this case. And that is going to be the many patterns that transitive and intransitive verbs end in, the characters that they end in that are giveaways as to whether they're transitive or intransitive. And we are saving that for the next video, part 2, because it's going to be pretty lengthy, or at the very least it's going to make this lesson video too lengthy. How to tell if a word is transitive or intransitive, and this one is like a good one because it lets you know if the word is transitive or intransitive even without a sentence. Like, you don't have to have it in the context of a sentence with the particles to know. You can just literally see the word in a dictionary, and you can not 100% correct all the time, but you can gamble or make a smart guess as to whether it's transitive or intransitive. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so that's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you learned something, and I hope you enjoyed your time doing so. If you'd like to express that, you can like the video, leave a comment below, or subscribe if you haven't already. If you'd like to support more of these video lessons, please do consider checking out our Patreon page. Also included on the screen right now are, of course, a bunch of links on where to find and follow us elsewhere online. Lastly, check out our Discord server. We've got a community of hundreds of so if you're looking for somebody to voice chat with just to practice speaking Japanese, or if you just want to talk about anime or music or manga. And with that, see you next time.